Right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to everybody who's come so far, Knut, and thank you to the IMO Secretary General. We have a very interesting panel, I think, for you now. Collectively, these people on stage, I roughly calculated off the back of a fag packet this morning, responsible for around 1,000 vessels across most major trade lanes. So when we talk about the decisions that the industry needs to take, when it comes to the efficiency of decarbonisation, all these big juicy topics that we're going to be tackling this week, these are the people that are going to be taking those decisions. And while I don't want to put words in their mouth, I don't think they have any good decisions to be made. There are sound strategic bets, I would say, but ultimately, I think we're still in the realm of talking about the least worst options, in search of optionality, a hedge bet, if you like. Whether we're talking about dual fuel or retrofitting the existing fleet, ship owners are essentially aiming to build as much flexibility into their fleets as possible, because the real issue here is fuel availability. Sustainable fuels are currently not globally available, we know that. No spot market exists. A vessel capable of burning sustainable fuel is unlikely to generate value from that capacity until that fuel becomes widely available. Now that poses a real dilemma for these people. Do nothing, well, it's not exactly viable in today's climate, or invest to adapt, which realistically is going to destroy value in the short term. Finding that right balance is challenging. And no matter how many ships these people here, they control, collectively, you in the room control more, there is a reality here that we need to acknowledge. The structural challenges of decarbonisation cannot be solved by individual ship owners. The relationship between these owners, the cargo interests who are represented here as well, that is going to be key to resolving the contractual and financial incentives that are going to allow genuine collaboration, that word that we're going to hear a lot about this week, and a more efficient fleet, regardless of the fuels that we're actually putting in the tank. It's almost a byproduct of that discussion. So, enough of me. Let's move on to the panel and see what they think. What are the least worst decisions that you guys have been making? Future-proofing shuttle tankers with a keen eye on carbon capture. We have Ms. Ingvild Sæther, President and CEO of Altera Infrastructure. Finding efficiency through scale. We have Khalid, Yousef, Alhammad from Bahri Ship Management. Helping ship owners improve their emissions performance and assisting charterers finding more efficient vessels in the dry bulk fleet. We have Bonfils, Chief Executive of CPP. Representing the world's largest container fleet and a fearsome program of efficiency measures already well underway, we had Mr. Darr from MSC. And finally, we have Lasse Kristoffersen from Wallenius Wilhelmsen, who I understand recently said in an interview that he is not going to rest until shipping has reached net zero. A promise that could keep him working for several years. I think you may be quite old by the time you're retiring on that bet. But I'm going to start with you, Bud, if you don't mind, because I can't think of a better illustration of this dilemma that the industry faces right now. You know, you represent what I would describe as an ambitious, large company, the largest container fleet in the world. You are ready to invest. You are already making strides towards this 2050 goal that you have as a company. But when we spoke recently, you told me that technology was not the blocker anymore to shipping's decarbonisation, and yet you have a lot of very difficult decisions ahead of you. So start us off by explaining why you're not waiting, but equally you're probably not able to move as fast as you really want to. What is it that you're doing to get that flexibility in? Is this a hedge bet as far as you're concerned?
Thank you, Richard. And, good morning, everyone.
Can we have some volume?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I like to think of it as not choosing among bad choices, but rather managing the risk in a very uncertain environment. So maybe a different way of saying the same thing. But either way, it's not an enviable task. And of that number of ships that Richard mentioned, I mean, we have about 730 container ships, a few ro-ros. We're the third largest cruise line in the world. We just took delivery of our latest cruise ship. So we've got 22 of those. We've got 24 ocean-going ferries. We've got tugboats. We've got high-speed craft ferries. So almost all of the dilemmas that ship owners are facing in their various sectors, we've internally had to face. And really, there's no perfect solution at the moment. If there was, we'd all latch onto it and we'd all be doing it. Everything is still under development, and I do think that there's a race going on between the technology development side and being ready to accept the fuels, and then on the other hand, the development, creation of the midstream, and actual delivery of the fuels on board so we can use them. And those two races have to merge at some point. And my comment to you, Richard, was meant to say, I feel very comfortable that on the technology side, it's winning the race by far right now. And that I feel very comfortable that by the time the fuels we really need to make the transition are available at scale and in a marketable sort of way, we're going to have the technology in place and available and proven to use it. But there's still work to be done there. For example, with ammonia, we're really just now developing testbed data that we don't have yet for how this will perform in engines and how much pilot fuel will be needed and addressing the toxicity concerns. All of the fuels have some challenges, so I don't mean to pick one out. But the technology readiness is at different levels for different fuels, but I feel comfortable it's winning the race. So what do? Right now, you can't sit around and wait. That's not an option, in our opinion. We have to continue to invest in our fleet, and as we do that, one of the ways that you can de-risk the investment in the longer term is build in as much flexibility in the CapEx up front as you can tolerate so that you have more choices available to you later on for a particular ship without a major modification. And keep in mind, if you're building a cruise ship might be a 40-year asset. It was before the pandemic. Afterwards, it may be. Some cargo ships may be a 30-year asset. What is the optimal fuel for a particular ship or a particular deployment of a ship may change over that life cycle. So, you might do yourself a favor to think about, not only can I make the ship compatible with one additional fuel as an alternative, but how hard would it be to adapt to yet another fuel throughout the life cycle of the ship? Because the picture could look different in 2035 than it does in 2030.
We'll come back to some of those points, but Lasse, I mean, I made a joke. I mean, you're not an old man by any stretch, but if you are genuinely going to be working until we reach net zero, I think you have quite a few decisions to take. You've got a legacy fleet here. You've got ships that are perhaps older than you would perhaps want, given an ideal situation. That means you've got to take difficult flexibility decisions now, rather than the best case scenario in 5 years' time. Give us some idea of your thinking in terms of what that means practically right now.
Well, first of all, let me start with, I think rhetorics matter. And I think we should stop talking about how difficult it is and how many options and how, I mean, yes, there is uncertainty, but goddamn, I mean, the world is full of uncertainty. We have China, US, we have uncertainty all over. This industry is experts on managing uncertainty. And the solutions out there, I mean, it's not that many. Let's face it, unless you really believe in nuclear, we have to start with electrons. And we can't get them on board effectively as hydrogen, so it's methanol or it's ammonia. And somebody needs to stick out their head, and I think companies like ourselves, and certainly yours, Bud, I mean, with the big company you have, and show the way. Not sitting back, and of course we can have a big discussion saying, we need to wait until the market is ready and fuel is available everywhere. Yes, it's always like that in a transition. Somebody needs to lean down and say, okay, I need this amount of fuel there, who can provide me? And then turn around and make sure they find customers willing to pay. And that's what happened in our company right now. We're saying we can't sit back and wait anymore. We have to get the customers on board. This year, we have told all customers, if you want to make more business with us, you need to start paying for decarbonization, and they do. And our route, and the way we see it, is that the only option we have on energy transition now is biofuels as of today. And we are using that as much as we can, but there's a limited source. Within 3 to 5 years, we believe we can phase in methanol, biomethanol, green methanol. And unfortunately, the way we see it, ammonia is maybe 5 to 10 years away. I hope I'm wrong, but that's not, it's most likely that. So for us, it's about demonstrating to that today that we can use biofuel, get the customers to pay for it. And we have said that by 2027, we will introduce the first zero-emission service end-to-end. We're in the industry of transporting cars and vehicles and excavators and stuff from, let's say, a factory in China to your door, Richard. In 2027, we have said we want to do that with zero emissions, end-to-end. That really takes a big rally, and we can't wait for the market to be ready. We need to take some bold decisions, and we do that.
I'm going to come back and ask you whether that results in a tiered market in just a second. But Ingvild, I'm going to come to you next, because you said a while ago that you wanted your investments to be future-proofed. And I wonder what that means in the context of shuttle tankers, which is your core market. How do you future-proof an investment, given all this uncertainty that we just discussed?
Well, I think I said that actually in the context in 2017, 2018, when we ordered our last class of shuttle tankers, and where we didn't consider ordinary vessels with scrubbers to be future-proof, because we didn't think it would survive 20 years of development and societal demand on what we need to do. So we ordered dual fuel with batteries, capturing the VOC at that point in time, which was not an easy choice to make from a financial point of view. But you have to, as you say, Lasse, lean in a bit and make some of those bold choices. But that being said, I think the key to really accelerate, at least on the tanker side, is that we need to have new business models, because it is actually possible to do some of these shifts and do it in a cost-efficient way. But as long as the capex and the opex and the fuel cost is going into different pockets, that slows down the development.
Okay, we're going to come back to that as well. But Khalid, I mean, we've been talking here about assets, and of course it's not just about the assets, it's about the operational efficiency that we can apply, and scale helps, and let's face it, you've got a bit of scale in your operation. Give us some opening thoughts in terms of, you know, how that fleet efficiency can be improved, and where the complexity lies, and how we can overcome some of those decisions that are still laden with uncertainty, regardless of whether you're actually owning or just operating the assets.
Yeah, exactly. So we are an in-house manager of the fleet. So Bahri has, at the moment, 92 vessels. Majority are tankers. 40 of those are VLCCs. And about 28, 29 IMO at the moment, chemical tankers. Efficiencies we have started actually back in 2014, and mainly because we were focused on reducing the fuel consumption. A reduction in fuel consumption, that increases your profit margin at the end of the day. So that was the focus, and that has worked very well also with the decarbonization. And since that time, we have been deploying technologies. I'm not going to name the names, but basically we were streaming the information from the vessels into the office. In fact, last year we've inaugurated our Fleet Performance Center, so we can look at the fleet completely and get all data points, not only the fuel consumption, energy consumption, but all the alarms and indications to monitor the efficiencies. And that has been working very well. In addition, we have managed to convince, within Bahri there are owners, we managed to convince them to invest in high efficiency, high quality painting, which is expensive to apply, full blasting of the hull, and you have these high coatings that are very expensive. They are reducing the fuel consumption. In addition to additional fuel saving devices, Meade ducts, the Boss cap fin, all of these are not cheap items, but we are benefiting from these installations that we've started back in 2014. So you have to look at the whole thing holistically to reduce the fuel and eventually reducing their carbon footprint. But I would like to add to the subject of the types of fuel as we go forward. It really depends on your profile as an operator. If you have fixed cargoes from A to B, it makes it easier for selecting that type of fuel. For example, on the VLCC side, as we carry the crude mainly from Saudi Aramco, it makes it logical for us to go with dual fuel using LNG because it's readily available within the region. And since you have fixed routes, it makes it more difficult, for example, on the chemical tankers because they're going everywhere, depending on the cargo. One thing we're looking at is methanol as well, because SABIC, the Saudi basic industry, also produces methanol, so we can carry it as a cargo and use it as a fuel. But it's not an easy thing to do. It's convincing your supplier, convincing the customers to buy into the fuel. This is something we have been trying for some time. It's not easy to do, and I'm commend you for that. It is a major issue, but for the short term, I still believe LNG is the way to go.
Christian, I deliberately left you till last because I suspected that this might come up. This relationship between the charterer and the owner is key here. I mean, I said at the outset that we're not necessarily just talking about decisions that individual ship owners can make, because I don't believe that any individual ship owner can make that much of a difference. Your current passion is really sort of trying to improve that incentivization to get the right decisions. Give us a view in terms of how we can improve that, because that's key here.
Yeah, I think we heard a lot about collaboration this morning, and we also hear that data is available, but all the contracts we fix the ships at are backdated, and they have split incentive. Vessels are operated by warranties because of inaccurate data. We have lots of tolerances in the contract, so no one is really incentivized to improve. So even though that we don't want another index, I saw last week that the DNV released a hearing about a recommended practice for a new index called BTI, where you measure vessels efficiency in real life. And I think if we have such an index, or if we are able to transform like the accurate data into an index so owners are incentivized. I think we hear a lot about energy saving devices, but none of the contracts really take that into account. You don't necessarily need to have a better CII because you have energy saving devices if you are in port. So I think by changing the contracts we can do quite a lot, and I think collaboration is more than just talk about it, but we need to have that implemented into contracts.
Well, Lasse, I mean, it's a perfect point to bring you in.
I just want to jump in there. I think, to back on that, the structure of the industry doesn't help in the transition, because it's set up in a way that really conforms yesterday, right? Owners doing TCs, and you have ship managers, and there's so many layers, and each one is not incentivized. And that's why owners like ourselves and others really have a responsibility to orchestrate that. So, but there's something extremely important happening right now. And that is that carbon goes from being something we report to something we transact upon. And that will completely change how we think around carbon. I mean, we're starting to pay for EU ETS. Now, when we are getting our customers to pay for reduced carbon emission, they are transacting on that basis. So one of the big barriers in this industry is to create commonly trusted, available data on carbon so we can transact on it. And when you report, it's up to you to make it right. When you transact, it's something different. So there's a big change now that really is challenged by the structure of this industry.
I mean, it's interesting, the VTI system that you mentioned, I don't think DNV described it as such, but I'm a journalist, so I'm allowed to describe it as such. It is effectively a patch on a deeply flawed CII system. It makes us think differently about that relationship between the owner and the charterer. And I think if we're looking for a positive outcome of CII, that's one, that we are actually thinking about how we can better incentivize people a little bit more efficiently. You know, is the industry structurally flawed in terms of the charter contracts? Yeah, possibly. Ingvild, what do you think?
No, I fully agree, and I think that this link between the incentivizing of how you can make the savings is extremely important, and the price of carbon will clear some of that. I also think that we have now had a very efficient market where it is a commodity market and price is declaring. I think we need, for the transition that we need to go through, think about it more in industrial terms, and back to what Knut was talking about, also collaboration. We don't have the right collaboration today. It's extremely difficult to get the owners, the charterers, financing, technology aligned. We need to think not only for the next quarter and the next and the bottom line today, but how we can align it in a longer term, which is lacking today.
Easier said than done when you have to make quarterly reports to the market, of course.
Yeah, but what are we solving for? We are not solving for the next quarter really as a society.
But incentivization, what can we do to improve this, in your view?
Yeah, and thanks. I have to say the quarterly reports, we have many challenges. That's not one we have to deal with, thankfully. I think that there really does need to be an enhanced level of collaboration, and I think Lasse hit on a couple of points that I think were spot on, and one was, you know, it is really important that as ship owners, we don't sit back and say, woe is me, you know, the fuels aren't here, when are they ever going to be here? No, no, no. We have to be directly engaged with the energy providers, make sure they know we want the fuels, that we will use them when they can produce them. And I think energy providers have to be part of the mix on this collaboration. And they have challenges when they get in the same room together sometimes because of competition concerns, but without them being part of the solution set here, it won't work overall. I heard a presentation recently, I'm not going to say exactly where, but I thought it was very interesting. You know, basically in our industry, we've got bareboat charters, we've got time charters, and we've got voyage charters, and then some variations of those. But those are basically the three options. And in today's world, and where, I mean, you take CII as an example. I mean, how are you ever really going to find a way to operate the ship in an optimal way by that metric unless you're collaborating between the owner and a ship and a charterer in a way it hasn't happened before? Maybe there's a fourth way that's needed. And I was really intrigued by this kind of blue sky thinking that maybe we just don't have enough choices, and we need to look at new ways to have charter parties actually reflect the world we're living in today, which at the end of the day, I mean, this isn't about who makes the best announcement or you know, who has the best soundbite in the moment. This is going to be, did we effectively decarbonize? Because, you know, future generations are counting on us to do our job properly here, and we can't do it alone as ship owners. I think collaborative platforms, some of which you're going to hear from here this week, but such as the GCMD, the Lloyd's Hub, the Maersk McKinney Moeller Center as well, I think it's great. They're really finding some unity of effort, bringing us together and bringing diverse stakeholders together, because that is what it is going to take. There's no one single actor, and in my opinion, even this sector, if you look at us being 4% of the fuel consumption worldwide, can drive energy markets. We even need to collaborate broader than just within ourselves, but also within other sectors that are large consumers as fuels.
I mean, let's not discount sound bites as well. Think of the poor journalists having to create some headlines out of this week. Come on. Ingvild, this is not a new conversation by any stretch, but I mean, what do you think? Are you getting the impression that this conversation is now moving on? Are we having real conversations about improving that collaboration?
I think it's going far too slow. I mean, we don't have the sense of urgency that we need to have, and I don't really understand why, but as you say, we are making capital investments that will last for 20, 30 years. So the time to act is really now, even in 2050 perspective. Many of the decisions could be easily made if we had alignment between, if we didn't have those short-term contracts or the voyage charters, and the economic benefit were actually the economic benefit we're used to make these decarbonization initiatives. So I think we're going too slowly.
Lasse, you got your retirement on
no,
the horizon.
Yeah,
no,
I will retire late, that's for sure. So, but I think it's, the fact now is that business is moving faster than regulation. And thank God we are. Because business needs to solve this, and then regulation can help to scale it. But that's, and that's my only issue with this week's theme of partnership, if it's used as an excuse not to show leadership. Because it's very easy to lean back and say, well, we don't have this, we have to collaborate on all this. I mean, we don't have time. We're leaders of this industry. I mean, I'm in this room, I can't see you all, but we need to take that personal responsibility to demonstrate that way. And I'll try to be specific on three things. So, okay, so where do we need partners? For what? One, we need partners on fuel. We will commit. We're willing to commit from 2027. If somebody can come up with green fuel imports we can use, we're willing to commit now. Two, we need partners on technology. This is going to be expensive, so we need partners that can reduce the cost of the transition. We need new technology. That's why we invest in looking into sails and wind and everything that can reduce the cost of the transition. And three, we need partners on data. Trustable, transactable data, so that we can make this mechanism work of moving the liability from the ship owner all the way through to the consumer. In these three things, we need partnerships, but that requires that we show leadership and tell what are we willing to do.
I'm going to come to Bud in a second, but can I just pick you up on one point there? Do you genuinely think that the industry is moving ahead of regulation? We heard Kitak saying that he hopes, and I think we're going to hear from Fottini from the European Commission later on this afternoon saying the same thing, that there will be this eventual convergence between European and IMO regulation. Are we not in a situation where the majority of the industry are using this lack of regulatory clarity as a pretext for inaction?
Yes, you're right. But let's then not talk about the majority of the industry, but those who are actually leading the industry. And that's my point. You will never move slower than regulations, because that's the nature of regulations. So, I mean, at best, there's a 1-1, right? I do think so. There are companies around the world, I mean, the Maersk, I'm sure MSC, others, Altera, are really showing the way on taking investments now, putting money in, leaning forward, and take commitments, and showing how this can be led. And again, I think we should be really glad for that. I mean, politicians are excellent, but not at defining business solutions. They are good at scaling good business solutions, not showing them.
But I think I cut you off there. So.
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, you gave me something else I'd like to comment on, because I agree with Lasse. I think in some respects, the industry is ahead of governments. And let's just look at one fundamental. For, 2 years now, Lasse? We've led industry efforts to say, hey, the answer is decarbonization by 2050. Now, you can tinker on the margins of what the definitions are, or this or that, but we as the industry have been united for 2 years now that the right answer is 2050, we need to decarbonize. Governments have had a long time to toss this back and forth, and they're now really at a critical juncture in July, which I think is a bit of a serious threat to the IMO if those governments do not help that organization succeed in this moment of time in the most important regulatory issue they'll probably ever face. They have to catch up on that and put their geopolitical differences aside and find the middle ground. So I think that's very important. When it comes to leadership, I also very much agree with Lasse. Leaders have to lead. And one of the reasons, though, I think that these collaborations are important is it shouldn't give cover to those that are saying, well, we're just going to wait for the answer and not do anything. Because sitting around and waiting for the perfect to allow itself to prove it could be the enemy of the good is not a good answer here. But those collaborative platforms are a way for those that are making investments, that are forward-leaning, that are exploring all the options, to share some of what they've learned with others in the industry that might not have the capability to do that themselves. So I think there is a role for these platforms, but it shouldn't be to hide behind the excuse we're waiting for a platform to do this or that or this or that, because in my opinion, the industry will decarbonize with or without additional regulation. But the pace of that progress towards decarbonization and whether or not it is truly an effective path that we are allowed to be on will largely be framed up by the regulations. And that's why I think it's also important we collectively give good, sound, practical input to the regulators as they're shaping that framework, because that will have a big impact on how fast this happens.
It's funny, I've never interviewed a ship owner that says, compliance is enough for me. They're always going ahead. And yet, the industry is basically just meeting compliance when you look at it holistically. And that is the problem, because we have to deal with the majority. While you are all here, and I've said it before, you're representing 1,000 ships, that's great. But 80,000 ships are out there, and the vast majority of the shipping industry are basically moving along at the pace of global regulation, the lowest common denominator. So I'm going to repeat the question, and if anyone else wants to ask it, are we using the fuels debate and the regulatory lack of progress as a pretext for inaction?
Can I say something? At the end of the day, as an owner or an operator, you're in it to make money. Let's be very clear about this, no matter what is net zero. If you're going to lose money, you're not going to do it. So therefore, the common denominator will always be the regulation. Again, I commend you and others that you're taking the lead. But unless you have the cargo owner as well as your partner who's willing to spend the additional bucks to install whatever you need to install or to decarbonize faster, it's difficult to do. So you need that collaboration when, Knut says collaboration. So there is no doubt in doing that. But for any other ship operator or ship owner who's out there in the spot market, you're in it to make the money. So you'll go with the minimum regulation required and you make the money. To take the leadership, you really have to have that marriage between the cargo owner, the ship owner, and the ship operator. Otherwise, it's difficult to do because you have to spend money on it.
And I want to make money and a difference, and I think that's possible. So just back to regulations. Regulations is key. I mean, we need regulations. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we can't sit back and wait for regulations, but we need to work as hard as age to get regulations. And we need market-based regulations, right? I mean, what we've had up to now, technical regulations, that's only dealing with the energy efficiency, not the transition. The transition away from fossil fuel, that needs a market mechanism. And that's why Kitek, I think, we're quite lucky. He has it last year in service, and he's going to leave with a legacy and putting some of this together. And back to Bud's point, it sounds very theoretical, but it's exceptionally important what's going on in IMO now, setting the target for 2050. 2 reasons. One is today, if we have the current target, we will meet it with hardly any green fuels. We can just do it by efficiency. If you take it to 0, you need to have a complete workover in 30 years and change the complete fuel base. And that needs to start now. So it's extremely important where you put that point in terms of what will we do. The second reason why is the only way they can stay relevant. It's not going to be a question of if we need to reach 0 in 2050. I mean, look at the kids at the street. They tell us you need to. It's just a question of when do we realize as an industry that we will. And if we start to realize in the mid-30s, you have 15 years left of your vessel, and suddenly there will be 0 latest by 2050, it's going to be a disaster. So this is not a question of whether. It's just a question of realizing early enough so we can make proper decisions.
I don't disagree with you, and I agree with you, but that this year represents a key pivotal moment in terms of that trajectory. But increasing the trajectory from 2050, 50% to 2050, somewhere around net zero, that really just increases the level of the trajectory that we're looking at. Ultimately, if everybody does nothing until the 31st of December 2049, then we haven't really moved the dial. And the key thing that I think is being missed in this debate is the fact that actually the hard work comes after MEPC 80. Just agreeing the strategy is not enough. You actually need those market-based mechanisms. You need a carbon price. And all of these discussions that we're going to be having here today, all of the reports, the Ricardo DNV report, the Trafigura report that we saw last month, they're all saying the same thing. This is possible, but only if we have clarity in terms of the clear demand signals and the regulatory environment in which we can operate. Are you in any way optimistic that we're going to get that?
I'm absolutely optimistic. I have to be in my line of work, and I think most of us do. But I think there's a couple of fundamental principles here. I mean, we have to be creative, we have to be open-minded, and we have to be optimistic. I really think we have to believe we can get there, and I'm not an ideologue. I don't say that just because I want it to happen. I say that because I've been working at it really, really hard, and I've had the pleasure to work with some of the people that are really leading the charge on not just identifying the problem, but identifying solutions. And I am confident we will get there. It will not be easy. It will not be uniform. There will be bumps in the road. But one example is, Richard, I congratulate you for finding a silver lining in the CII, that it's focused attention on some things that need attention here. But, is intensity really that helpful of a metric if you're talking about that type of intensity as opposed to greenhouse gas intensity as a fuel characteristic? Is that really a metric that's all that helpful if, as I anticipate, we'll all be speaking the same language, that we're talking about decarbonizing the industry by 2050, not decarbonizing in terms of per unit carried, because there's so many variables that come with that, even if you have a better metric than we have right now, that I think the effort's much better spent working on a fuel standard. I think that has a much better opportunity, and to Lasse's point, in combination with an economic or market-based measure, we tend to say, I think, economic measure now, because it's a little more politically palatable, but you probably need both of those to create the right framework and help with the right trajectory.
Christian.
Yeah, just to add on Bud's there with with the CII and the issue for contracts in terms of CII, we have seen no one so far in the dry industry have ever accepted the BIMCO CII clause, and I think it's just the opposite of collaboration. We need these contracts to be updated and changed so there are a common incentive to do some improvements.
Ingvild.
No, I just think that a very important part of that decarbonization journey is also CCS and the opportunities that that gives. And so in 2027, we will have used our carbon budget. After that, every emitted ton will build debt to our children. In Europe, there will be a need of 200 to 300 million tons of CO2 in 2030. And it builds to, I mean, enormous figures in 2050. But today already, the price of carbon in Europe is allowing carbon to be stored at the, below that cost. So the moment that we get that industry going, and it's not far away as we thought 5 years ago, it's actually here, it can actually be done from 2027, and it will be an enormous market that opens up also for the maritime industry. I mean, 200 million tons, you would need 200 Northern Light projects. So that is the scale of it. And I think there will be enough CO2 for everyone.
and you ask if we're positive, and I would say I'm tactically negative and principally positive, and I'll explain why. And tactically, because I think we run around and make this too complex and too difficult when we talk about how difficult it is. I mean, these are within the merit of what we can solve, technology-wise, fuel-wise. We know basically what we should do. We just need to get our act together. And principally, I'm positive, partly because what Ingvild said, the technology development is unbelievable. I heard one place that now you can capture, transport, and store carbon in Europe for $100 or less. Yeah. That's more or less the same as the ETS. So basically now you can take it out as cheap as to pay your way out of it. I mean, technology is moving. And for shipping, the reason why I'm principally positive is that it's damn cheap for the society. You see all these examples, and we can do it on what's the difference on the car, or what's the difference on the bread, or what's the difference on... I mean, we can decarbonize very cheaply for the society as long as we get the orchestration measures in place so that we can move that cost from a business-to-business relationship between an owner or a manager or whatever you have to the consumer. For the society, it's cheap. And that's why it should be possible for IMO to get this through.
I was reading a note, I should have been listening, but I was reading a note from Stephen Gordon from Clarkson's, came in as we were speaking earlier. And he was saying, you know, there are implications for earnings potentials, asset values, and increasingly tiered and complex charter markets as the green fleet transition evolves. And I wonder, you know, Lasse, on your point, and actually Bud, yours as well, you know, we're going to get that lumpy, it's not going to be even. We are going to have a tiered market. Do you think that's inherently problematic, or can this, you know, blue chip, ambitious, progressive set that we see on stage here, do you have enough gravitational pull to take the rest of us with you?
You ask me? Or, I mean,
well, I'm asking
stealing
all
the thunder.
We've got 2
yes,
minutes
I do
left.
think so. Yes, definitely. My ambition is to make it so challenging to be on the wrong side of that story that my customers cannot do anything but doing it zero emission. That's our target.
Can I be the naysayer here?
Please.
And I'm totally saying
no. I don't think we have enough cynicism on this stage.
That's fine, because I can fully understand what you're saying, and I get the feeling in North Shipping. This is really a European perspective. I'm coming from outside of Europe, so it's going to be extremely difficult because it goes down to cost at the end of the day. If you're in the spot market, you're just going to follow minimum regulation requirements. Although we all have ambitions to remove that 3% that we produce globally. But it's going to take almost $1 trillion if you look at the numbers. So it's going to be tough, Lars. I commend you. In Europe, you have the EU ETS, and maybe eventually it will go over everywhere else. But for outsiders, it's not easy. It's not easy to follow the EU.
I don't say it's easy, but we have customers in China, in Japan, in the US, in Europe, in the Middle East that are willing to pay for decarbonization. So it's possible, but it's easier to see from a European perspective. I see that. So.
Kristen, final comments?
No, I agree with Lasse. I think the market will find its own way. We saw that with scrubbers, with everything, that it's supply-demand driven. So, and there will be incentive to improve. And we saw also that with the VMR presentation that the more efficient ships, fuels will be more expensive going forward. So there will be incentive to do these investments.
And you're not worried about the tiered aspect of that market?
We have had tiers market always, I think, that in different views. So there have always been better ships and others invest before others, so I'm not too nervous about that.
Ingvild, your carbon capture ambitions, do you have enough gravitational pull to pull the rest of us with you?
Well, I think there is enough gravitation in the world to really make that happen. And if we see the speed that the EU is working at now for CCS, for instance, I think that gives really big hopes for what we can achieve.
But I'm going to give the last word to you. Give us some inspiration to end on.
Yeah, we can do this. And Lasse is right. The technology is improving rapidly. The fuel providers know we need the fuels as part of the package. They're going to provide for all of society. We just need to stay committed. We need a regulatory framework that is sensible, practical, and doesn't lead us in the wrong direction and helps us get there with enough pace to where we can meet our obligations to do our part as the 2 to 3% that we are today, which is significant. We've got to do our part, but I really think we can do it. We just need to pull together and share what we've learned with each other and continue to have these collaborative platforms succeed in their efforts as well and not overlap each other, but rather complement each other. Thank you.
See? Easy. Decarbonize the entire industry in under 30 minutes. So, you know. Congratulations. Thank you to our panel. Round of applause if you don't mind.